today. So I tried doing this yesterday, and I kept getting interruptions, dogs, people walking in. So I'm going to try it again today. And I don't know if I'm able to say what I said yesterday, so I'm just going to rant on what I feel today. Because yesterday was different than today. Day before yesterday, I was interviewed, ironically, by a columnist, editorial columnist for the Arizona Republic, who no longer is, as of think today, or this week, no longer with the Arizona Republic, as are many of the other opinions that I agree with at the Arizona Republic. So she asked me at some point or early on, and it kind of push a button, and I have to reflect for 24 hours at least on it, and then yesterday I did a video that didn't record, so I'm trying something different today. But then by today, there's the news of this guy Charlie Kirk getting shot yesterday after I had ranted. And the question she posed was, I don't recall if she said, "Why are you?" or "What do you say to people who say you are?" And I would like to say it caught me off guard, so I can't remember the context of how she proposed the question, but when she said it, it really kind of, I can't wait until Monday when the video comes out, but it kind of really set me into this ahijo feeling like, and it was, why are you angry and resentful? Or when they say you're angry and resentful. And it's true, I've had people say, "Gee, Chef, you became angry and resentful." When I was younger, I went to an all-white school from K to 8. And I entered high school not having the experience of living, of going to school with people of color, people like me, people who spoke or understood another language, people who ate beans and tortillas at home. So I had become accustomed to Gringolandia, navigating in that world. And just for the record, as I got married and then became a lesbian, I tended to go into that flavor. And that's a whole nother subject of why I did that. But nonetheless, I go to high school and I'm seeing these kids who are marginalized, and I didn't understand that. But I had this, my English class was in remedial, and so was my math. And again, that's another conversation of why I ended up there. But the short time I was in that English class, I remember it, my perception was that of, holy shit, this is like Welcome Back Kotter, the TV show where, they're disruptive, they're throwing papers, talking behind the teacher's back, making fun of her, picking on other kids. And I experienced that firsthand. And I've had to reflect on my experience and my thoughts. My immediate thought was, losers. No wonder you're in this class. And, just that colonial thinking. Since then, of course, I don't think that. It has to do with marginalized. It has to do with just marginalized, whether it's whatever. That's another subject. But when I'm asked, I would see them like, "Are you picking on me because I'm Mexican?" I would hear the Chicana kids say that to the teachers. And of course, colonial religion bringing up, Silvanita was sitting there going, I don't belong here. Why are you talking back to the teacher? You know, I'm the kid who never talked back to her mother. And that initial was, why are you so angry? And I remember they eventually became my friend, but I perceived that person to be quick to anger and quick to talk back, like, what are you looking at? And there's always been that Chicano in my experience that might have somebody looking at them and they're like, what are you looking at? You know, in anger. And I'm like, why are you so angry? Well, it's taken me a long time. I'm 65, and it's only really since I've learned to put words to my feelings, that somatic feeling, that knowing that you have, but you don't have the language, and that I realize we're crabs in a bucket because they put us in this bucket where they just give us crumbs, and then we have to fight each other for those crumbs, whatever the crumbs may be, whether it's education, positions at work, fame, acting, you know, everybody and every aspect of the U.S. and the treatment of people of color, we have to fight for what little we're given. That's John Leguizamo who speaks of that. And I've come to realize that anger that I perceive those young students in the walkouts, which I participated in, but it's generational. It's the abuse. And I didn't see that, although I started to feel it. I walked out with them. I grew up being told I wasn't like everybody else, so I didn't think I was like everybody else. But it took me a minute to see the similarities. Yes, I wasn't like everybody else, but I shared the same similarities, the same being marginalized, the same looks, the same questions, why are you here, or being followed at a store. I felt all that. And, you know, added the fact that I look like a boy. Growing up, it was always, even to this day, it's like sir or he or hey kid, hey boy. And so I understand today. So when I get asked, why am I angry? I think about those kids in school, being a freshman, and being so hyper aware of the racism and the mistreatment and the inequality and the inequity. And I wasn't hyper aware because, remember, I went to an all-white school, so I didn't really, I knew that some of my friends who were the daughters of the ranch owners out in the country, I'd go with them to 4-H at the fair and hang out, and they would say, you're not like the other Mexicans. And the other Mexicans that they were referring to were the ones that they saw working at their father's ranch. They perceived them to be dirty, uneducated, and they, in their young, naive, you know, San Joaquin Valley had probably voted for Trump, but in their young, then naive, or their perception from their parents, I wasn't like a dirty Mexican. And they questioned that, like, you're different. Well, yeah, motherfucker, my mother probably made more money than you. We shopped at the expensive stores. She bought tailored, gorgeous fabrics and then made me clothes out of it and made me wear dresses to school. So, yeah, I wasn't like the other Mexicans wearing, you know, clothes from the Segunda. But I am like the other Mexicans. You put me on the field and guess what? I'm going to be dirty and stinky. I am like the other Mexicans. I am working class. No matter how much money my parents had, that wasn't my money. And they treated it like something that maybe they didn't deserve. They spent it, believe me, but it was new to them, you know, and that's a whole subject of growing up with privilege, you know, in a world where you're not treated with privilege. So, am I angry? She was saying it because the subject of my book is my life. I'm looking for my book. The subject for my book is my life. And if I'm going to be honest and write about my life, I'm going to write about the things I saw, the things I experienced all along. And in my defense, I've been saying it. I just suffered from hermeneutical injustice all along since the 90s, since I started in Phoenix in my career as a chef. I've been saying the things that I say today. I just didn't have the language to say it correctly, so I said it in a catty, teasing question, putting questions out there. In the 2001, 2002, I wrote a weekly column for a year for the New Times, and I wrote an article that said, Rick Bayless, leave our food alone. And I wrote about how I felt watching Rick Bayless for the first time on TV represent my culture. I had a mixture of excitement that he was doing it right, but a mixture of, wait a minute, why is this guy representing my food? And it was 1995, 96, PBS. I was watching Chinese food, Yan Can Cook, French food, Chef Jacques Pepin. And nobody ever questioned, like, Julia Child, right? Le Gourmand. And I knew there was I perceived that there was a pretense in the culinary world that I like and I don't like, but I knew it was there. I perceived it. So I got into it. And I got into it right off the bat, knowing that Rick Bayless existed. And just to clarify, today it's always been the same thoughts, but today I have a language, and the language in the word is appropriation. Rick Bayless has appropriated Mexican cuisine and commodified it to his benefit with zero relationship to the culture. It was only his privilege and education that allowed him to go to Mexico and extract ancestral knowledges for his own personal commodification of that culture. In doing so, he has both elevated quote-unquote Mexican cuisine, but that's white saviorism, and he has also taken up a lot of space where somebody of the culture could have been doing that job. Those are my thoughts. That's what I believe in. I would like to pursue a PhD. I already started doing the research. The subject of that PhD would be, in fact, mole, at the center of it, and the commodification of the culture in the U.S., and the lack of representation. Because, once you have an expert, why, they're the expert, no matter who follows. Case in point, it's not only in restaurant ownership, in TV shows, it's also in cookbooks. Diana Kennedy, Marilyn Townsend. In fact, I have tons of those books right here in my shelves. They're over there somewhere because they're Mexican, yes, but they're not foremost authorities, in my opinion. Any researcher can get in there and research and learn something. But do I have a relationship to it? Do I, for example, here, I'll give you an example. If I said, and I wanted to open a barbecue restaurant, somebody right off the bat is going to say, now wait a minute, Silvana, Why are you owning a barbecue restaurant? That's American culture. And aren't you, quote unquote, angry and resentful? Now, normally if I didn't know better, I would say, yeah, barbecue really is not my place. It's not my thing. I didn't grow up with smoked brisket. Okay? But I did grow up with barbacoa. And guess the research has taken me to, I have a whole shelf on barbecue books. Do I read them? No, not really. Reference material. Instead, I did a barbecue tour. But the research I have done that I'm interested in is the history of barbecue. The word is a Taino word that the Spanish just took and then saw the true Americanos, the people of the continent in Mexico, make a pit cooking, and they called it barbacoa because the smoky flavor of the Taino word that they use for, they use branches, and they would make a little palapa without the palms, and then they would put fish on banana leaves or palm leaves and let it smoke slowly, rising, so it's offset smoking, open air, on the beach. And that was barbacoa. The technique, not the product that was produced. So they erroneously called it barbacoa in Mexico, in that state, obviously. So that is a chichimeca. The Toltecas learned it from, chichimeca is the Mexica, the Aztecs, referred to anybody outside of La Gran Tenochtitlan, outside of what's now Mexico City. They call them barbarians, which is Chichimeca. So the Chichimeca is a mini of the north of Mexico City cultures. That means Pachuca Hidalgo, the Tolteca. And that is now pretty much the center of barbacoa. Birria is other states. But there's a thing called food pathways, and barbacoa is really the child of Pib, which is under earth in Mayan. And that would be the Mayans cooked under earth, pit cooking, and they now today you would know, like cochinita pibil. I made a lot of money off of cochinita pibil. But that is the original pit cooking of the Americas. And from there, the Tolteca and the Chichimeca cultures learned the pit cooking, and then eventually the conquistadores called it erroneously barbacoa. And when the U.S., with their manifest destiny and their doctrine of discovery, end up stealing under false pretense over half of Mexico, they inherited Texas. And when they inherited Texas, they inherited the culture of barbacoa that eventually became barbecue. That's why I would own a barbecue restaurant, because I have the right to it. It's my patrimony, mi patrimonio, mi derecho, my legado. But I wouldn't open a hamburger joint. Now, I probably would. I've been tempted in the past to serve a hamburger, but I always question myself, is that really my place? I could make a mean freaking burger, a la mexicana, or con chilito de salsa macha, or, I could make a burger con salchicha de chorizo, longaniza. I could make a burger. But is it really my place to commodify that burger? To open up Silvana's burgers a la mexicana, we do it better. Not really. Not really. Then you could say, well, if you were open up a burger place in Mexico, which is very tempting, your birth is U.S. That's the culture. Yeah, but I wasn't raised Estados Unidos. I was raised Mexicana. And my integrity and my love is to todo Mexicano. So yeah, I mean, I've been tempted to commodify gringo culture. But it's not my place at the end of the day. It doesn't feel well with my essence. So I can understand an Irish pub saying, oh, let's put a taco on the menu. I could understand a bar place, with chicken wings and spinach dip, putting a taco on. I understand that. It kind of bugs me. I don't eat it. Is it appreciation or appropriation? That's the $1 million question. But flat out, when somebody 100% says, you know what, we're gonna learn how to make those flour tortillas from Sonora because we saw them in Rocky Point, and then we're gonna go find these ladies, and when they say no, you cannot have our recipe, and no, we're not gonna teach you, we're gonna sneak around the back and film them through the window, and then go back and figure it out. There's always YouTube. And then we're going to open up a burrito truck. They got shut down, and, that actually did happen. Those gabachas did that, and they got shut down. Am I mad about it? Yeah, that pisses me off. It does. It doesn't feel good. It really doesn't. Mexican food is the most appropriated food in the United States. I've done the research. Mexican food is also the first country to be protected by UNESCO and called Patrimonio of World Heritage, Patrimonio de Humanidad, in its entirety. Why? Because we still, in spite of colonization, we still use the tools, the metate, the petate, the kneel down on, the molcajete, la manilla del chocolate. We still use our ancestral tools and our ancestral methods and in our ancestral techniques and ingredients. Did you know that Mexico gave the world over 60% of the basic market basket? That means that el cacao, el tomate, the tomato, corn. The list is 31 ingredients, by the way. When you do that as part of your basic visit to the grocery store, you're purchasing my ancestors' sciences. They domesticated a wild sprig that came from Argentina and started growing, and they domesticated into el jitomate, which I believe started with the little cherry tomato and then grew from there. Same thing with corn, right? It started with maíz palomero from Teoncitle, the little popping corn, which still exists in Mexico. It's a little corn about that big, which is ironic, right? Mexico gave the world corn, and then under Peña Nieto, Mexico was buying, I'm not even sure, I should look it up, but a vast percentage of their corn from the U.S., which is now totally GMO'd. So yeah, am I angry? Yeah, I'm angry. But because I thought, no, my answer was no, I'm not angry. I'm just speaking truths. Okay, I don't walk around angry. But when I think about it, when I think about things like quieren el taco pero no al taquero, they want the culture but not the people of the culture. Yeah, man, I can't remain happy or indifferent. I have to really think about that. And it starts in my own personal industry, but it is in every facet of the machine, the academy. But for me, it's in my industry. And, I used to joke when I got into it back in formally got into it because I grew up in Mexican bakeries, and Mexican bakeries, how long we got here? 38 freaking minutes already? Oh, 25. Okay, good. Mexican bakeries, it was all Mexicanos. There were my tios and la señora, la dependienta, and family. But in the restaurant world, it was different. And all of a sudden, it wasn't Spanish being spoke. It was English. And the jokes were sexist and racist for the norm. And the joke was always with the gabacho chefs saying, "Oh, check it out, I speak kitchen Spanish. Más platos, Jose. Ándale, ándale." I've heard that more than once. So right out of the culinary school, I was the chef. I was the executive chef wherever I was. And I purposely ran a kitchen that was respectful. I didn't allow vulgar language. I did not allow sexist or homophobic jokes or racism. And, I got to change, at least in my world, how I operated. I didn't operate in the norm. And today, seems to be like most people try to operate that way because lawsuits. So things have had to change. It's funny how things change when money's involved. But the racist and the homophobia and the sexism is still there. They're just not talking about it out loud. But they have looks and inside jokes, and then you can feel that energy. And I just, food is love. It's not a competition. If you cook with that kind of attitude, your food's going to be marginal. That's why you have all these restaurants that are the foods, maybe originally the chef created the food to be good. And I'm talking about chain restaurants, right? But the people who are cooking it are just there for a paycheck. Zero love. That's why a good burger tastes kind of flat, Support local and local owned. But am I angry? That's a loaded question. My question would be, why wouldn't you be angry? Why are you not angry? Why are you not pissed off that at the Arizona Biltmore, they always hire people of lesser melon versus the whole entire staff is brown, has been there for decades and knows everything about the buildings, the history of the equipment and the food. Yet they don't get the promotions to be that lead chef. Yeah. I asked myself, how can Rick Bayless have a business in Chicago when there are salt trucks parked ready to block Trump and not say anything? How can you know that your staff, porque no te hagas, you know the status of your staff. How can you know that your staff is suffering in the shadows of filled with fear while you take vacations and act as if nothing? You gotta speak up. So yeah, I guess I am angry. Yeah, it's, one thing I've learned over the years with death threats and all that stuff. Fuck them. My mother was so worried that my looks or what I said, she was worried about what they would say. And I would say, I want you to tell me who they are so I can go handle this. And she would get so mad. And my question to her was, Are they really you? Are you they? And she would, no. I said, then if you don't care, if I don't care, then why are you worried about what other people say? And I will go down. I'm a poor woman. Financially, I'm not a rich woman. I'm a bad businesswoman because I could not suck it up and put up with the devil as a business partner. I could not. I let him have my whole entire concept, and they make millions of dollars off of me. I couldn't. My integrity just didn't feel right. I could have just looked the other way, and my grandmother would say about my mother, she would say, juzga la loca y ignórala. And I'm like, I can't judge her crazy and ignore her. Well, that was my business partner, and I could not judge him crazy and ignore what he was saying. Once I saw who he was, I could not do it. It went against everything that I stand for. So I'd rather die on my feet than live my life on my knees. Emiliano Zapata. It's on my back. It's right there. It's on my back because I believe it. I use it as a crest, a shield, a talisman. I believe in that. So, yeah, I'm pissed. It doesn't consume me. It doesn't define me. I'm just pissed. And I cannot stay silent. So my question is, why aren't you pissed? Why are you emitting condolences for somebody who was shot? Yeah, that's sad and wrong, and gun violence is not. Well, meanwhile, the kids that were shot in Colorado, nobody's talking about. There's a lot of hypocrisy with this Charlie Kirk, but again, that's another subject. Me personally, am I mad? Am I angry? Yes. Do you blame me? And if you do, let's talk about that. I'm mad about so many things. I'm angry, but I'm not resentful. Much love and peace to everybody. Thanks for listening and allowing me to rant. I don't know that I'll do this again, or maybe I will. Peace out.